name is Chantal Thorn, and I'm the Director of Learning and Leadership Development at D2L. And my path to becoming somebody who cares a great deal about facilitating individual and organizational excellence started many moons ago, quite easily enough. Sitting on a bus, I'm about 11 years old, going home after the school day, and somebody who I don't know very well walks by and says, "You're disgusting," and keeps walking, comes off the bus. And I'm a relatively quiet person at 11, and I'm kind of thrown off by the comment. A couple more bus stops, somebody else comes by. "You are so gross," walks off the bus. Continues over and over again, which builds into about 2 or 3 years of, escalations of people threatening to, beat the crap out of me after school, whatever it is, me getting in trouble for skipping school because I'm trying to get out of the school before somebody's going to catch me, and the whole thing. And this is not unfortunately, this isn't a special situation. I'm going to guess almost most of you in this room have some version of that story. Bullied for whatever reason. Really strange things started to get bullied for. So that thing for the bus, by the way, in case you're curious, was because I was an 11-year-old girl who hadn't started shaving my legs yet. So that was the fodder for that one. Of course, I immediately went home. "Mom, guess what I'm going to start doing?" But that was enough. That was enough to, make me feel like a horrible human being. But then it was the hair. Follow me about the hair, and I'm a country singer, so then I got all kinds of crap about the country singing, and it was just a weird 2 or 3 years of random stuff that made really no sense to me as an 11-year-old. But it taught me a lesson. It taught me a really big, unfortunate lesson. What do you think is the lesson that I learned from those? It was about 2 or 3 years of bullying. What do you think? I should cut my hair. You can tell I didn't listen, so. But I did start shaving my legs. What do you think I learned about myself? What's that? Yeah, I was definitely impacted by what other people said, for sure, and kind of similar to what Jim was talking about, right? I had that realization. But what I fundamentally learned was that who I actually was, just in my own essence, because I was getting teased for things that were just me. I'm sorry, I've got curly hair. What do you want me to do about it? I sing country music. I don't know, what's the big deal, right? So my lesson and my takeaway from those years was, you are not okay. Something must be fundamentally wrong with you if people you don't really know are threatening to hurt you because of things that are just who you are. So that was a good one. I thought, all right, I can play this game, so forget who I am. What do I need to do to become the person that doesn't get me beat up after school? And I was willing for quite a few years, actually, to play that game and try to figure out, okay, what do I need to look like? What do I need to value? How do I need to act? How do I need to talk or maybe not talk as much? And it was several years of exhausting experimentation. Anybody ever try to be somebody you're not? It's exhausting. And so when I say, so that started at 11, so I would say when it stopped officially, although some days are better than others, was when I experienced a postpartum depression with my son. So I'm 43 right now. So that was about 8 years ago. So there you go. So that was a long run of trying to figure it out. Who am I? I couldn't figure it out. My version seemed to work in one context. It didn't work in another culture. And the postpartum depression threw me out long enough for me to say, you know what? My body's done. I'm wiped out. I'm exhausted of this faking it and kind of constantly trying to figure out what the heck version of myself I'm supposed to be depending on who I'm with. And that's what led me to go, you know what? I'd already started grad school. Actually, I was long done by then. But I thought, I need to have a different essence when I'm doing leadership and learning and development and coaching now. It was very clear to me now that I was not going to be doing any coaching or any leadership development program from then on that was not going to start with me supporting people to very clearly establish and figure out who they are, what triggers them, what lights them up, what throws them off course, right? Because there's no point in me, and much of what Jim was talking about, right, in terms of creating this space, the fertile ground for people to bring their best self to work, is about other people. But I don't even want to start helping you with that, or strategizing, or effective decision making, unless you are bringing the best version of yourself to that role, because it's all going to be for naught. It's a bit intense, but it's all going to be much more challenging if you're like, okay, which fake role do I wear today? Which fake mask do I wear today? It's just exhausting. And your body will catch up, I guarantee you. Your body will catch up eventually and say, you know what? I'm done. I can't do this anymore, right? So what I want you to think about when you think about authenticity, and I'm sure there's some of you, that word has a real, like, it's got a, oh my God, so Oprah-like. You know, I know it's got a vibe that can be a little bit of a pain. But I want you to think about, are you going to be the team, the leader, the company, where the people who walk in these walls are constantly trying to figure out what the heck version of myself do I bring, wasting precious energy and precious efficiencies and precious time, playing that game every day and exhausting themselves? Or are you going to be the company and the leader and the colleague who's saying, I would rather figure out who you are, what your strengths are, what you bring to the table, and leverage the heck out of them so that everybody gets to contribute what they're meant to contribute, and fill in the gaps and the blanks with each other, which is what an actual high-performance team is, rather than being a space and a company and a team that's constantly trying to make somebody change. Because that's what I think authenticity brings to the table. And that's a hell of a lot of work. It's not easy. It's not easy. I know, show of hands again, how many of you have kids? Kids under 5, I should say. Yeah, because they're a special brand of authentic. My kids are just getting out of it, so it's breaking my heart. My 8-year-old's getting out of it now. So you're seeing the societal, oh, you shouldn't like that. Well, that's embarrassing. You're seeing it, right? It's starting to get away at who he truly is. But my 5-year-old feisty Miss Olivia is still planted firmly in her authentic self. So your children will show you what this looks like. And I think that's important to remember, because a lot of the times when I'm coaching or supporting people and trying to find their authentic self, which I know sounds very, again, out there, they think it's new work. They think it's new work. It's out there. Like, how am I going to find my authentic self? And if you have children, you know darn well that you were there already. Ask your parents. You were there. Ask a 5-year-old to be hugged or picked up when they don't want to be. They don't go like, oh, okay, I don't really want to do this, but I guess because you want to. No, they do the wet noodle, they cause a scene, and they make you like want to, fight or flight, right? They don't. Their boundaries are very clear. Mama made you this spaghetti. Oh, thank you, Mama, it's my favorite. No, they don't do that. I don't like it, right? So there is no truer version. Are they sophisticated with their authenticity? Mm-hmm. Could use some shining around the edges. But they are our best teachers of what it looks like to hold clear to your boundaries, to express what you like and you don't like, to be okay with what you like and you don't like. God love my son. He wore a princess dress, much to my 72-year-old dad's dismay. I thought we had to have lots of conversations about this. He doesn't wear the dress anymore, right? But they don't care. They're not mired with what I call graffiti. And I say graffiti because graffiti can come off. They're not mired with the you shouldn'ts. You should say you like that even if you don't. You should fake your way. Everybody else in this team does it this way, so even though it's killing your soul, just figure it out. They don't have that, right? So your work to try to figure out, because that's usually the next question, and maybe some of you are sitting there going, okay, but I don't know who the hell, I've been doing the faking it thing like you, Chantal, for about 12 years now, and I don't even know what I value or what I care about anymore. And that's the work to be done. So while you're doing work, and you're going to talk later, I know, about strategizing and the company and the vision and your work, please keep in the back of your head that, and I guarantee you, it will be less successful if you have not done the self-work first, the messier work usually, to figure out what the heck version of yourself is the true version of yourself so that you can bring that to the table with less exhaustion than the faking it version. Right. I'm going to ask this question with the assumption that most of you aren't going to raise your hands. But I want to ask the question anyway so that you can think about it even in your own mind. How many of you feel Like you have no idea who you are anymore. And again, I'm assuming you're not going to raise your hand, and that's, if you're brave enough, that's awesome. But who the heck is thinking, I don't know. I don't even know what I value anymore. I don't even know what I give a crap about anymore. I don't even know what lights me on fire anymore. And that's like one of the scariest, most difficult places. Anybody who ever comes to me, especially, and I'll say this, most of my work in coaching is done with women, and most of my consulting work is done with teams, obviously, that encompass both men and women. But it's this vibe of being sick and tired of being sick and tired, right? And not being able to find the forest for the trees anymore. And there's tons of research. Jim talked about some research. There's tons of research to show how exhausting it is, how it leads to people wanting to leave your company. That if I feel like every time I step into your walls, I got to be a fake version of myself, I don't want to be here much anymore because it's exhausting. That leads to less productivity, less risk, less innovation, because people are just wiped out, right, for being fake half the time. So being able to think about, first of all, what am I doing to demonstrate an authentic, real version of myself so that the people around me will be able to feel safe enough to do the same thing is really important. It's not static. It's not static. So it's not, okay, does authenticity mean like I literally respond the same way every time in every situation? Of course not. It's not. The word actually comes from the Greek word authenteos, which actually literally means that of which I made of my own hands. So it doesn't mean static fake, it means of your own doing. It is your storytelling. It's your accountability to bring that version to the forefront. So it doesn't mean like, oh, all of a sudden I have to be the exact same person, the exact same response every time. So some of the research, there's a research out of UCLA, spiders. Anybody afraid of spiders? Like really not? Yeah. Uh-huh. Wow, what? Really? You guys are braver than me. A whole bunch of people who are afraid of spiders. The research split them up into 3 groups. Group number 1, all I want you to do is think neutral thoughts before I bring the spider close to you. Whatever, make your grocery list. Think about what you're going to do tomorrow. Let's say you're group number 1. Group number 2, I'm going to bring the spider close to you. And all I want you to do is cheer yourself on. Think positive thoughts. I ain't afraid of you, spider. Touch you. I don't worry about it. I'm fine. You're going to cheer yourself on. Positive affirmations. We hear about that a lot. Positive affirmations. And you guys are going to say, oh, hell no. No, thank you. I'm terrified of that spider. I hate it. Don't bring it near me. Neutral. I got this even though I'm terrified. Hell no. There's no way I'm coming anywhere near this spider. What do you think they found about who was able to get closer to the spider? Which of these 3 groups was able to get closer to the spider, had slower and lower cortisol release, which is your stress response, slower heart rates? Which group do you think? So I'm hearing middle group, maybe, because the positive, yeah? Anybody think this one? Let's just, yeah, sorry guys, you're out. Yeah, what do you think? You're thinking the neutral group, potentially. Okay. So, yeah, yeah. So the research will suggest that it's this group. Because again, there ain't no help in faking what you're actually feeling, right? It doesn't help. It does not. We think it does. We think I'm just going to fake it. I'm going to pretend this isn't bothering me. I'm going to pretend that leader didn't just tick me off in that meeting. I'm going to pretend like I'm not ready to have a meltdown because I've been going 24/7 for 5 days. I'm going to say positive affirmations. I'm going to grind my way through this. And there's a lot of research to support all that. So it gets in our vernacular, right, about how we get through things. But the truth is, there's so much more research that says, be true to yourself. Just call it for what it is so that you can remove the impact fast enough then to become a high-performing person. Same thing with reading things or saying things out loud. So there's some interesting neuropsych research that says, even if you just say it in your mind, but it's more powerful if you say it out loud, like, this sucks. You might be thinking that right now. This sucks. I don't agree with this. I'm tired. That ticked me off, whatever it is. That the simple fact of claiming truth for you, whatever that might be, in your head's pretty good, out loud's even better, writing down is the third kind of impactful one, is enough to reduce your cortisol levels, reduce your heart rate, keep your prefrontal cortex working enough so that you can be effective in whatever meeting you might be sitting in when you're having that thought, whether it be with the 5-year-old or your boss. So there's tons and tons of research that's going to keep telling you, stop faking it, for God's sakes. Does that mean you need to walk around, you can think of some people who might not have the most defined or refined version of this. No. But to be an effective human being, the quicker and sooner you can get to a place of authenticity, of truth for you, the quicker you're going to get to be an effective leader and an effective human being or an effective partner in your actual teams. So, Brené Brown. Anybody familiar with Brené Brown? Only a few. If this resonates with you at any level, you got to go on YouTube afterwards. I have a little video, but I'm assuming they'll get the slides afterwards. She is one of the preeminent researchers right now on shame, vulnerability, authenticity, and has tons of data points and tons of research to help kind of navigate how these pieces come together in order to create the story of what you need to be doing to do this more effectively. All right. Can you read that? Should I read it? I don't know if everybody way back there can read it, but it's not something we have or don't have. Right? It's a daily practice. It's a daily iterative practice of going, what do I actually care about? What do I value? What do I actually feel about this situation? Right? And that's why it's agile and it's adaptable. It's a collection of choices that you're making every day. Right? And it's about that choice to show up and be real, whatever that means for you. Choice to be honest, the choice to let your true selves be seen. I remember one of the first times I was asked to facilitate some work for a professional group that was primarily women, and the intro call had me so stressed out because it was like, make sure you don't do this, and and as you can tell, I'm pretty colloquial. Don't be too colloquial. Be very kind of professional and stand behind the podium and make sure you don't do that. And I thought, I can't do that, right? It's exhausting to kind of have that level of fakeness while you're trying to impact other people. So you might notice that yourself. How often are you being required to stuff that you really don't want to be stuffing? To believe things that you don't actually believe? To hold back when you have an opinion? To be okay with stuff that you're actually not okay with? And how much energy are you wasting when you're doing that every day? Yeah. I had to ask because, again, I don't want to be fake, but I don't want to be horribly disrespectful either. So I asked David, my slide has the word bullshit on it. Is that acceptable? And he said it was okay. So, but these, David, we can talk later if our judgment call was wrong on that. May not be here later. These are some of the factors that are working against you when you're trying to fake your way through your interactions with other people. The first one is, as I mentioned before, people's meters are good. One of the things I always stress about the most when we're doing these kinds of things, leadership programs and keynotes and stuff, is that inevitably you go back to your teams and you're like, okay, right, Jim said to do this, and Chantal said to be real, and Dave's going to tell me this, and I'm going to put that hat on, and you go back and you're kind of like trying it all with your teams, and your teams are like, oh my Lord, the heck 101 course did she just come from? Help me. Why did she go? Because they know, right? They know. It's like, oh my God, it's not real. And people's meters are very good. They really are. They're really good at knowing. And when we're trying to create a space where people trust each other and you build relationships, if the first thing they feel is fake, 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 then no. Hell no, I'm not going to risk trying and innovating and getting better at this particular product. No, it's not safe. Because you're fake. and I don't know what that means for me, right? It's not safe for me. No, I'm not going to bring my best version of myself. You're not doing it every day. And what you do bring to the table weirds me out. I can't trust it. And so no thank you. So when you're trying to create an environment where people are bringing their best versions and they're really innovating and learning and growing, but the leaders or the predominant group of that particular team is all kind of having that weird fake vibe, ain't nobody else going to follow suit, right? They're not going to feel safe enough to do it. So that meter is working against you. The second thing that's working against you, anybody who did like a Psych 101 class will remember the term cognitive dissonance. Yes, oh, I know. Memories of Psych 101. Do you remember? Can you call out in your version? Again, it doesn't have to be the technical version, but what is cognitive dissonance? What does that mean? Who's looking at their phone? Yell it out. Yeah. Could be, almost. Yeah, so you have your worldview, and that if something comes at you that's kind of different or challenges that challenges that perspective, it can be difficult to kind of do that. Yeah, pretty close. Anybody else? It's close. So it's frankly, it's just that say-do gap, right? It's just this idea that when I believe something in my gut, when I believe that that leader is way off, when I believe that that strategy meeting is bringing us down a road that's not right, when I believe that, and then yet my behaviors on any given day do not match, it creates dissonance. As humans, our psychology wants to be aligned. It wants to be. That's our natural state. Our natural state is authentic. Our natural state is healthy and full of well-being, like Jim discussed. And so take too many days, too many months, too many years of living in a dissonance space where you're in a team or a company or a space that you actually legitimately don't buy in, where there's discrepancy between what you actually really believe and what you do every day, and that's going to work against you too. Your brain wants to be aligned. It wants to, right? That's the healthy version of yourself. So those two phenomenon, well, I wouldn't call the meter a phenomenon, but in the psych world, the cognitive dissonance phenomenon is actively working against you, and it's exhausting, and that's why I ended up with postpartum depression, right? And that's why when you're talking about creating a space of well-being for all of you, if there's too much of that for too many days, you'll get there eventually too. Because psychologically, it's messing with you. It just is, right? So, and we know that when we have a bunch of people around us who are not authentic, it leads to all these wonderful things. Less engagement, right? Less trust, employee alienation, like all the things we absolutely legitimately do not want. And why do we fake it? And this seems obvious, but why do we fake it? Why do we assume or we know in our heart that it's not safe? Bring my actual self to work. I'm really loud. C'est français, I don't really need a mic, but thanks, Dave. Why do we do that? Why do you think we do that? What are the systems or phenomena or situations that have led us so strongly to feel, you know my story and why I kind of got down that road. From an organizational perspective, why do you think we get to this space that we feel like that's the better version? What was judgment? And what? Yeah, ooh, it's rewarded, bingo. Shoot, who doesn't want, it's like the kid with the cookie. It's the same thing, right? Okay, well, I didn't really believe that. Darn, my boss seems to really like that. So maybe I'll go with it. So you're rewarded. You're worried about judgment. Fear. To fit in, yes. And what was this one? Because we need to succeed. To fit in. And that's like, for me, I don't know who said that, but for me, they're all great. But that's one of the biggest ironies for me, right? Because I hear that a lot. I don't know, I just want to fit in. I don't want to be like the outlier. I just want to fit in so bad. You ain't fitting in. You're not fitting in. You're relationships. I do it to have good relationships, right? Because I don't want to rock the boat. You're not having relationships with people. If you are not having relationships with people, you're not having relationships with people. You're not fitting in. You're not achieving anything that you actually think you're achieving. And with women in particular, and again, it's just because that's been a lot of my experience, I hear for sisterhood. Well, I don't want to shine too much, or I don't want to really take this too much space, and I just want, I want everything to be good, and so I'll just dim, and I'll fake, and I won't give that organization half of what I could, because I just kind of want to be quiet and under the radar. And you get none of that. You literally get none of that by virtue of doing this faking, right? Your company gets none of what it really should get. It does not leverage you in the least. It doesn't maximize the skills that could really be producing a high-performing team at all. When even a third of your people are thinking, I better just do what they want me to do, right? So there's a lot of funny reasons that we do this that actually literally bring us the opposite of what we're trying to achieve. So I would like, are we going to try that video? We are going to try. Oh, there you go. I'm not going to, because, really. Dave is going to play a little video of Brene, who I was telling you about before, who is the master sociological researcher, thousands and thousands and thousands of data points on looking at this phenomenon and what it does.
I think a lot of people were raised to believe that. It was modeled, I think, certainly in our culture. We see that a lot, that to be vulnerable, to be open, to be exposed is to be weak. And the truth is, what I found in my research is that vulnerability is not weakness. In fact, I would argue that it's our greatest measure of courage. When we went out and asked people, what is vulnerability? We heard things like, vulnerability is the first date after my divorce. Vulnerability is starting my own company. Vulnerability is taking responsibility for something that went wrong at work. Vulnerability is sitting with my wife who has stage 3 breast cancer and making plans for our young kids. Vulnerability is taking my business public. The definition I use in my work of vulnerability is simply uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. Vulnerability is about the willingness to show up and to be seen even when there are no guarantees. And it's interesting to me, one of the things that I thought was really interesting, I gave a talk, it's probably a couple years now, and it was being translated by people doing American Sign Language, and they came up before the talk started and they said, are there any words that you're going to use a lot in your talk that we should know about that or might be different? And I said, well, I use the word vulnerability a lot. And there were two of them, they kind of looked at each other and they said, oh, we do this for vulnerability. And I said, what does that mean? They said, it means weak in the knees. And I'm like, wow, that's not how I talk about vulnerability. And she said, well, there's only one other sign for vulnerability. And I said, what is it? And she said, and I said, oh, that's what I'm talking about. And so to me, vulnerability is our most accurate measure of courage. It's pretty powerful when I have 13,000 pieces of data collected over 12 years that I cannot find a single incident or story of courage that was not completely underpinned by vulnerability. I think the problem arises that there's so many little paradoxes with vulnerability, and one of them is that vulnerability is courage in you, but weakness in me. When I meet you, it's the first thing I look for in you, but it's the last thing I want to show you in me. And so I think to really put ourselves out there, knowing that if we do that enough, we're going to fail, I just don't think it gets more courageous than that.
And we talk about vulnerability because I don't know that there's much more vulnerable than trying to figure out who you actually are and what you bring to the table and then just presenting that to people. And so I give the example, so I worked at Guelph General Hospital for 10 years, and I've only been at D2L for about 2.5 years. And at Guelph General Hospital, the things that I brought to the table were positive. There were things that I brought to the table. I like to think of ourselves as having I know not everybody agrees with this, but a big bucket of traits. I don't actually believe in weaknesses, so we can talk about that later, but we have a big bucket of traits. And your job in effective leadership is figuring out when is it the most important time to use that one, right? And so when I started at D2L, all the things that I brought to the table, well, that's an extreme. Some of the things that I brought to the table were now problematic. They were highlighted as difficult. So for me, it just kind of helped to reiterate, you have stuff that you bring to the table, right? And they're just real and authentic to you, and move you to a different boss, a different team, a different company, a different relationship. And it's either going to be the best damn thing ever, or what you do is actually going to be really difficult and annoying, and it's not going to fit at all. So it's not you. You can't just keep going around from each team trying to figure out how to fit in, right? So things like, for me in this case, being too soft and too emotional. I heard that a lot at D2L. I was like, I've never in my life heard this. What is going on? I was at a hospital where those natural tendencies of mine fit just well, perfectly well. You're too, emotional. You care too much about the people, Chantal. You got to get tougher and all this good stuff, which is not anything I ever heard previously. So now my job to do this is more difficult. It was a lot easier for me to be myself at Guelph General Hospital. It's trickier now for me to find the space to navigate that what I naturally bring to the table is a little bit counter to some of the culture that I'm in right now, right? So I want you to remember, you have stuff that you bring to the table. And your job is to contribute, not compare, and figure out what that stuff is. And remember that rather than switching your hat every time, paying better attention to when the thing that you bring to the table is most needed and when it's not is important. The things that I get a lot of negative feedback on, I'm still called on to leverage, as I'm sure you are too. Can you think of one thing right now that you're too? I say it's the twos. You're too emotional. Are you guys thinking in your head right now something that you are too? What have you been told you're too? You're too what? What is it? What are you too? What's that? Too vocal. You're too vocal. You're too analytical. You're too this. You're too sensitive. Anything that you've been told you're too, I'll bet you money it's your superpower. So don't start to decide that it's not what you're supposed to be doing, right? Try to figure out a way to find out when is it more likely my chance and my opportunity to show that to people. Rather than immediately assuming that it's something that you need to take off. I'm going to leave you, or take off the table, right? Because it's very dependent on lots of cultural pieces. I'm going to leave you with this question. We're not actually going to literally do it because we're going to move on to Dave's presentation. But I really want you to think about, before you start thinking about everything that you're going to do to support everybody else, when you think about your leadership and your influence, to get your own house in order first, because it absolutely impacts everything else that you're going to do after this. And if there are things in this environment that make bringing your best self to work challenging, then maybe you vocal people should leverage your superpower, and all of us, to figure out a way to answer this question so that we can figure out why that is, so that, as Jim suggested, we could create the fertile ground for all of you to be a really high-performing team, bringing the best of what you have to offer, rather than walking through the doors every day trying to figure out what version of yourself you're going to do today, because it's really exhausting. So, does anybody want to answer this briefly? I'm going to assume no. This is a really vulnerable. Speaking of vulnerability, but if you have answers, I'd urge you to go back to your leaders and find a safe space to try to fill in some of the blanks for this. It'll be the starting point. So. Thank you, everybody.